Hi, Srishti. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. I'm willing to hear you about all the amazing experiences, learning experiences that you create. And you're at the end of an amazing day, so you're going to be the cherry on the top of this amazing experience that we had today. And the stage is yours. Please share what you're doing over there to create such an amazing time for your learners on your programs.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm here to talk about learning habit loops. It's a project, a framework that I've been working on for a while. And I hope to share like one case study from where I applied learning habit loops. And yeah, with that, let's jump right in. A little bit of context setting just so that I know you know me a little bit better. Um, I was a craftaholic, as I like to call myself, loved working with my hands and getting my hands dirty. That's what got me to do industrial design in college. And it was my love for toys and creating learning experiences for kids through the tangible medium that's what got me to introduce um, into the world of learning. I worked initially as a design researcher and started off my career trying to work with edtech startups and trying to figure out how can we be more user centric. Worked a little bit in the edtech space, trying to decode what does learning mean and what can research do for learning. Transitioned to working as a learning experience designer and designing learning experiences for both kids and adults. Started learning in public, something I feel very strongly about in 2021. It really transformed my life. I don't think I would be here talking in front of you if it wasn't for that. Started the Learning Nerds Diary, which is a newsletter last year, and very excited to see what unicorns the future holds for me. Right. So just a little bit about me. Here's what you can expect from the next 30 odd minutes that we have together. Um, the first one, we'll sort of try to understand why are learning habits important. We'll see them in action and see an example from my own practice. We'll understand and decode what do learning habit loops really mean, what is that framework, how can you use it, and we'll leave some space for reflection and Q&A. So jumping right in, why learning habits, right? A quick like show of hands. If you raise your hand if you resonate with any of the following statements, right? The first one is I really wanted to learn something, but I couldn't. It could be whatever the reason might be. A quick show of hands. I know I've been there. Okay. Um, I bought a book that is gathering dust at home. Something we spoke about in the previous talk as well. I bought a book that's gathering dust at home. Something that you didn't end up reading or going through. Okay. The next one, I paid for a course, but I could not finish it. How many of us have been there? You know, paid money to attend a course, but could not finish it. Guilty again. Um, why do you think so many of us have had the same experience, right? This is a question that I like to ask a lot of people, and I think the answer that I get and arrive at most often is that learning fundamentally is hard, right? It's not an easy task to do, right? Oftentimes there is intent, right? You have intent, you want to learn. You also have the agency, so you have the resources, whether it's in terms of time, in terms of money to learn as well. But that's not often enough for learning, right? There is a secret ingredient that you need, which is time, right? So intent and agency are great and you really need them. But without time, learning is something that becomes incredibly hard, right? And as people who work in the learning space, how do you solve for time? And this is where habit building can really come in and be really powerful. And this is also where the learning habit loops comes in. So building on the giants of productivity nerds, like Neil and James Clear, this habit loop is sort of inspired by the work that they've done in the habit building productivity space, but trying to tweak it for the learning context. So we'll start off with an example, and let's see what these habit loops look like in action, and we'll come to what they really are. So I want to share an example from the work that we do at Next Leap. I want to jump back to exactly a year ago, where we were building a course that helped people transition into product design. The course was a cohort-based course that was supposed to be 8 weeks long and meant for people who did not come from a design background. So these were engineers, data analysts, people from very, very different spaces who now had decided that, okay, you know what, I want to explore product design as a career choice, and that's the shift that I want to make in my career. At Next Leap, one of our biggest philosophies, and when we look at learning, is that we believe in learning by doing. And we wanted our learners to build a project, a case study by the end of these 8 weeks to really champion that philosophy of learning by doing, but also for them to be able to apply whatever it is that they're learning on a daily basis as part of the course into something that's very tangible and something that can act as proof of work, right? So how can we get them to apply what they're learning and build that tangible proof of work? Now, if you were a learning experience designer on the team, how would you get these learners to consistently build? And in essence, this was the question that we were trying to think through about a year back in this context where we were. And here is what we did. So we broke down the project that we were expecting them to work on in 8 weeks into smaller milestones that were mapped to every week. So 8 weeks, 8 milestones. Now, for each milestone, we gave them a brief at the beginning of every week, which had a very clear output and guidelines that helped them build towards that brief. Just to give you an example, here is what one milestone in week 2 looked like, which was a project on competitor research. Here is what it looked like. It had an outline. How can you ace this project? We then highlighted the benefits of this project and its importance in the real world, right? So in the same context, we tried to articulate, why do designers need competitor research at all? And at what points is competitor research really necessary? So this went as part of the brief. We then shared resources and frameworks to support their creation, right? The idea was for them to create this project. Now, we try to create scaffolds for them to do that so that it's a lot easier. So in the same example, we shared a template with them. We shared a sample output. And we shared 3 common mistakes that we've seen people make in the past that they should avoid. What you see is a sample template, which was on FigJam that we asked them to duplicate and use it for their own projects. And lastly, once they submitted, we gave them positive reinforcement. So in this context, positive reinforcement took the shape of a public shout out. It took the shape of expert giving them feedback on the work that they'd submitted and access to bonus material that unlocked after they submitted something. So what you see on your screen is one example of a public shout out that we did in our community, recognizing all the people that submitted the project for that week. In short, we built learning habit loops. So we gave them the project brief that unlocks at the beginning of every week with guidelines and expected output. This, in a sense, was a prompt, which is what did we ask our learners to do? The next thing we did was we highlighted the benefit that they will get from working on this project and its importance in the real world. This highlighted the need, which is the second part of the learning habit loop, which talks about why this is important. The third thing we did was we supported their creation. This is, in a sense, supporting their action, which is the third part. And the last thing we did is we gave positive reinforcement, which is essentially the delight factor, which highlights why should they do this again. So these four quadrants and what you see on your screen is, in a sense, the learning habit loop. So in a sense, it's the prompt, which is what are we asking our learners to do? The need, why is it important? The action, how do we support action and scaffold creation? And delight, which is why should they do this again? Now you might be wondering, where is this useful? The first place is if you're trying to facilitate any kind of consistency in our learners. A lot of times what we're trying to facilitate is people to come back day on day and do something, whether that's getting better at writing or getting better at coding, or in this case, it was applying what you're learning and building something tangible from it, right? And getting hands dirty with product design and what it means to be a product designer. The second place where this can be useful is where you want to ensure that learners make the most of their time, right? We started off this conversation by talking about time and how that's an important part. The third one is to reinforce certain positive behaviors. As we talk about building learning ecosystems and building learning cultures, it's also about how do we ensure that the learners are behaving in the way that we want them to in that ecosystem. And the last one is to design learning cultures. Here is a framework that you can use to build your own, and feel free to take a screenshot of this next slide. We would also share an editable version of this for you to play around with after the session. So we have the prompt, some ideas on what this could look like. It could be a brief, it could be guidelines, it could be expected output, it could be a task. We have the need, which could be pain points, could be expected growth or delta that a person can see. It could be social proof, or it could be the relevance in the real world, among other things. The next part is action, which could take the form of resources, templates, frameworks, worksheets, examples, sample outputs. And the last one is delight, which could take the form of rewards, feedback, celebration, highlighting progress or the journey that they've taken so far. And with that, we sort of come to the end of this. One thing I wanted to leave you guys with, which is think of one challenge that you feel learning habits can help you solve. This could be personally, professionally, and that might help you apply what we've just talked about in the last couple of minutes that we've had together. So yeah, that's it from me, and we can open up the floor for questions.
It's everything in life. It's very interesting and powerful and somehow connected to what we've been discussing during this day. So
Você fala, já falei
it's
demais.
perfect. I mean, I know that it's going to be interesting, but it was even the simplicity of the model and such a powerful model. It's very, very good.
Aqui, né?
So we have some questions here. The first is having an education benefit, offering hard and soft skills courses directly in deploying packages and composing development strategies. Would it help the learning culture to become a constant in companies?
I didn't quite get the question.
If you introduce education as something that it's not mandatory, but it's a benefit for the participants, something that will be part of the compensation package in a way. What are your view on that?
I mean, as long as I feel learners have the agency to decide what they are, and often, like we spoke about learnability, right, before this. So, how do you get them to have the agency to pick what it is that they want to learn and the resources that an organization might be able to provide for the same? So, those are two things that I would sort of think about in this space.
From the diversity point of view, and there's some people talking in the chat tomorrow. We're going to have a specific session on DNI. But do you think that the simplicity of the method you're proposing will somehow would somehow or could somehow help more inclusion? Because I mean it's about the prompt and you choose what you're going to learn. So it's broad in terms of who could participate. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think very interestingly, there was a conversation I was having around this where the same habit loop might not work for everyone. And I think that's an important one to call out, right? Which is that as designers or facilitators in a learning experience, what becomes really critical is to recognize that not all learners are the same. So what might be delight for one might not work for the other person, right? So it's important to also articulate different behaviors that our learners exhibit, and how can we cater to that. So for the same experience, you might have different habit loops that you might build for different persona of learners, and in essence, that would recognize and can be used for a very diverse group of people as well.
Very good. We have a question here about your work with children. Have you ever tried the habit loop with children, and what about the results for that?
Yeah, I'm very excited to try it. Currently, the work that I do is more with adults, so I have more examples to share there. And this project framework was while I was working with adults, but I'm very excited to try it out with kids. And in case you do, please do find me on LinkedIn, and I would love to hear about your experience.
So this is a question from George. George, you have to reach Srishti if you've tried the loop with children and share. The final question.
Yes.
This is an event on courage or to change, to try new things. And I'm pretty sure that when you talk about habit loops for your clients, sometimes they don't quite understand and they prefer a workshop on leadership or whatever. It's a different approach, a more less structure that propose a more autonomous participation of the learner. What are the challenges you face when you're trying to offer this to clients?
Yeah, I think that's a very fair question. And even internally, right, if you have to evangelize this idea of learning habit loops, it's not the easiest, because it can seem a bit more intangible. Like content is very tangible, sessions are very tangible, right? Compared to that, you talk about learning habits, people are just like, wait, what are you talking about? So I think it's a very fair question. What I would say, and something that's worked, at least for me, is to start small. Do something that is probably low effort and show impact, and then sort of build a case for something that might be a little bit more radical. So there's always space for trying it in smaller ways, and that can be a great way to show results and then build a case for something that might be like a longer exercise. Yeah.
Thank you a lot for sharing your experience, your enthusiasm, and the framework that showed to us. And I think it's going to be great when you try using it in Brazil, and definitely we're going to share with you. I know that you're going to be here with Alex in another event also at the mall, so we're going to talk
Yes.
with a lot of interesting and passionate Brazilians. Thank you a lot for being here.
Thank you for having me.